Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to the 10th special interest group session on cloud technologies. Today's session will be focused on public cloud and the privacy and security concerns related to the public cloud area. Just like all the previous sessions, the agenda for today's session is going to be three-pronged, where we have first opening remark from Dr. Rashid Ali in case he is available. Then I'll be sharing with you कि public cloud में क्या security and privacy के what are some of the challenges that a user or a company may face and they want to consider while opting for public cloud. And then we'll have some time at the end of the session in case there are any comments or feedback. So I see that Dr. Saab is not with us, so I'll start with the second agenda item, which is public cloud security and privacy challenges. By the way, in case any one of you has to leave, so we'll be making the recording of this session as well as the slide deck available after the call on our YouTube channel as well as the website. So you can always take a look back at that at your own time. So with this, let's start. So the objective of today's talk is to essentially share with you what are some of those security as well as privacy issues when it comes to using public cloud. And the reason we've chosen this topic is because so that it helps you in making a decision if you are exploring public cloud. Please bear in mind that this is not a, I would not be recommending a specific cloud offering or a specific service agreement or a deployment model. This is in the vision of bridging the industry academia gap. So if you are from the background of cybersecurity, or maybe you are a system or network admin, or you are a prospective public cloud user, so you will find this useful in building a framework around these security and privacy challenges. So in other words, this will be a high-level business conversation, and in the interest of time, will not be delving too deep into the technical details. So as long as you have some fundamental operating system and networking expertise, you will be able to take away some valuable insights from today's session. This is the agenda. I'll give you a brief overview of public cloud computing, the typical architecture of a cloud provider. And the reason is this is very important to understand the security and privacy concerns that arise later on. Then I'll share with you some of the upsides as well as the downsides when it comes to privacy as well as security. Normally, any business concern would be expecting a lot of downsides from using public cloud when it comes to security and privacy. But as I'll show you in a few minutes, there are also upsides. And those upsides helps you in managing better security and keeping yourself, your private information secure. Then I'll share with you some of the key decision factors. If you are deciding on opting for a public cloud, what are some of the very key decision factors? These are not exhaustive, and the list that I will share is certainly will not be precluding the other factors, but some of those that are very important. And then I'll share with you, if you are working in cloud area, maybe from an academic or a business perspective, what are some of the long-term issues that to bear in mind in order to benefit from public cloud, in the rightful manner. So let's start with the overview of public cloud computing. As most of you would know, traditionally in the early 2000s, when at least in Pakistan, there used to be wired network connections, और जब wireless network आम होना शुरू हुआ और wireless access points लगने शुरू हुए, तो all of a sudden, as a network admin, you would feel that you are now being exposed and you are losing control, which was not the case जब आप wired connections use करते थे. And in many ways, it is analogous to the cloud computing that we're talking here today. Because cloud computing sort of takes it to the next level where you are sort of de-perimeterizing the whole information technology infrastructure. And you're essentially opening your organization to the rest of the world. So a lot of times when we talk about cloud computing, when you are now the sort of the keys to the kingdom are now out there in the public, there are two key concerns arise. One is security, and the second is privacy. Security is normally the In the continuum of security and privacy, security is the first one, followed by some kind of a privacy breach. So for example, in order for if you are storing some personal information on your customers, or you're storing some credit card data on your servers, and they are being hosted on cloud, so normally some kind of a breach has to first happen in order for a privacy, for example, PCI DSS regulation to be breached also. So both of these aspects go hand in hand. Uh, the reason we see a growth in cloud computing essentially revolves around the enormous amounts of flexibility and the availability that cloud offers, which is otherwise impossible to achieve, especially for the new businesses. So, for example, if I'm a startup and I want to spin up a couple of servers, one way could be to first, purchase those servers, deliver them to my site, have a couple of server racks, hire somebody to maintain those servers. But with cloud, I can get to scale in a very robust manner without having to spend that much of capital. So another important benefit of cloud computing is the pay-as-you-go model, where I do not have to, where my focus is shifting from capex to opex. So with all of these benefits, there are of course the concerns of security and privacy. Uh, let's look at some of the key sort of the architectural aspects of cloud computing. Uh, in any typical cloud, there are really 5 layers in which a cloud is deployed. And so uh, the first layer is the facility layer, यानी जहाँ पे उस cloud provider का data center based है. जहाँ पे so a facility aspect would involve the heating, ventilation and cooling aspects, the perimeter security, the security aspects when it comes to physical or chemical or some other means of vulnerabilities. दूसरी लेयर होती है कि उस फैसिलिटी के अंदर जो हार्डवेयर डिप्लॉय की जाती है, विच आर एक्चुअली योर compute network, memory, storage, and other resources, which are really the bare metal servers that you have that make up all the hardware in your data center. On top of this hardware layer sits the virtualization layer, where you use all the hypervisors, the VMs, virtual data storage, and so on, which really gives you those economies of scale and which helps you distribute these resources to the public at large. On top of the virtualization layer, there is the platform layer. Platform layer is where you have the all of the middleware, like the utilities, the libraries, and so on. That's where they sit in. And then on top of it is the application layer. Any hardware that you use, you always need some kind of application that solves some kind of a business problem. So on top of it is the application layer, which provides or where the applications that are being used by the end user are deployed. There's a very particular reason that I'm mentioning this to you, and that is when it comes to security and you're using cloud, the security of the first 2 layers, facility as well as the hardware layer, in most of the cases will be dealt by the cloud provider. And security on top of facility and hardware then shifts between cloud provider and the cloud consumer. And that shifting of responsibility is driven by the service models that you see on the screen. So I'll explain the service models and then I'll explain the deployment models. So अगर ये जो 5 layers हैं, मैंने एक एज अ क्लाउड प्रोवाइडर एक क्लाउड कंज्यूमर को अवेलेबल करनी है, तो there are different ways to go about it, and these are what are called the service models, and again they have a implication on the security and privacy aspects. So as a consumer, I can either get software as a service, which is really where you are delegating most of the control and freedom to the cloud provider. यानी मैं सिर्फ application layer पे काम कर रहा हूँगा, and anything below that is out of my control, is out of my scope, and I would not have the freedom to have the visibility and the management of those aspects, which means all the layers that are below the application layer, the infrastructure layer, the hardware layer, the middleware layer, and so on. फिर आता है आपके पास platform as a service. In platform as a service, it is sort of in the middle where you have some form of better control than software as a service, but still you do not really control or have the management or the bare metal servers are not in the scope of cloud consumer. And this lack of control then shifts the responsibility of security and privacy towards the cloud provider. So when you look at privacy and security, a lot of times it is driven by the control and the freedom. Whichever party has the more control and the more freedom, that party will be responsible for the security as well as the privacy aspects. The highest level of control and privacy and scope is in infrastructure as a service model, where as a consumer, I can manipulate all the compute, network, storage resources. I can determine or make the platform level decisions. I can make the application level decision. And of course, with those decisions, I have the visibility and the ability to manage the security and privacy aspects. So the infrastructure of the cloud provider, the various layers, and then the service models, both have an implication on which party will be responsible for the security and privacy. Then the other key aspect is how is that service delivered to me as a consumer? And there are a couple of ways to do it, and these are known as the deployment models. So if I'm a consumer and I'm looking for a couple of cloud resources, I can either go over the internet and provision or first of all, create an account on a cloud provider and then provision those resources. And if such a model is used, that's called public cloud. So I will be going over the internet and those resources will be shared with the rest of the world. But if I am looking for cloud's resources to be deployed either on-prem, that is my own premises, or maybe at a different premises, which do not necessarily need to be my own, but that has to be exclusively for my own use, that is what is known as private cloud. Yani isme access over the internet to the general public nahi hoga. It will be exclusively for my own use. So one thing that you may want to bear in mind is that a private cloud does not necessarily needs to be on your own data center. It could be outsourced to somebody else. And then of course, private cloud provides, greater amount of control and security and so on. Then there is the community cloud. Community cloud is essentially, if for example, if I'm a regulatory body, or maybe I am an industry association, for example, Pasha. Pasha is the industry association for IT and IT-enabled services in Pakistan. And they want to deploy a cloud which is to be used by their service providers. And some service providers may prefer one kind of a cloud, some may prefer another kind of a cloud provider. So they bundle those together and use some kind of a proprietary solution to access those, where different users can access those cloud, but they're not public at large, rather a given number of users. So in this case, it could be the companies who are the members of Pasha, and they go on to access this cloud. So that is a form of community cloud. Then there's the hybrid cloud, where we have we can have AWS or Google or Azure, but then there is some kind of an interoperability between those clouds, a solution that helps you leverage the resources of both. These deployment models, they do not necessarily dictate the security, but they have implications for security and privacy. And as I mentioned, जैसे आपने public और private के difference में देखा कि private cloud is, for example, if hosted on my side, I really have the visibility into all the components of that infrastructure, which means that the security assurance is more as compared to a public cloud. So these are some of the, from the cloud infrastructure perspective, different aspects that have a bearing on the security as well as the privacy aspects. Uh, Now, when we use public cloud specifically, one would wonder as to if there is any upside of when it comes to security and privacy. In most of the cases, that's the one of the biggest reason कि companies cloud पे नहीं जाती, because they lose control, and when they lose control, they do not know if they're vulnerable or not. They're not sure कि जो data हम store कर रहे हैं उसके अंदर हम किसी privacy regulation की breach तो नहीं कर रहे. And those are the downsides of public cloud, which I'll speak in a minute. I do want to point your attention to some of the upsides when it comes to security and privacy when you use public cloud. And first upside is the platform strength. Because if you are using a public cloud solution, you cannot, the level of uniformity and the sort of the homogeneity that you get on a public cloud cannot be achieved on your own private cloud. And when you have that kind of uniformity from a security perspective, you achieve better security hardening because आपको attack surface का ज़्यादा बेहतर तरीके से पता होता है. There is a downside to this which I'll explain. But from the security hardening perspective, from security management perspective, for example, if you're going to run some vulnerability assessments, if you are going to run some patch management or maybe security audits, those security management activities can be done better on a cloud rather than on a public cloud than a private cloud or on your own data center. Then from the privacy perspective, because the cloud is designed in a very homogeneous manner, तो single workflow जो होता है वो तमाम users of the cloud के अंदर manifest कर रहा होता है. For example, अगर एक cloud PCI DSS compliance है, they have the PCI DSS compliance certificate, and I'm developing a payment application जिसके अंदर मैं credit card data रखता हूँ, तो मैंने अपने customer को सिर्फ उस public cloud का certificate जाके दिखा देना है कि देखें जी मैं PCI DSS compliant हूँ, because I do not need to get a additional certification for myself as long as we meet that the specific requirements in the given use case. इसी तरह HIPAA की compliance होती है if you are storing personal data. फिर ISO 20001, फिर audit के standards on, and most of these public clouds are compliant, or at least that's what the claim is, that they are compliant with these privacy regulations. So this is the strength that you get from going on to a public cloud. The second thing is staff specialization. As a company, we heard the term knowledge economy a lot these days. And if your staff is focused on maintaining वो अभी तक अगर वही patch cables और वो RJ45 के connectors या servers को maintain कर रहे हैं, then maybe and as a business owner, you want them to be focused on the areas that are a concern for your business, in which case privacy and security is a concern. How can you get your people to invest more time in those areas? And public cloud can sort of take that burden away from them. For example, if you have existing network admin, system admins जो कि आपने hire किए हुए हैं, and all they do all day is कि वो ticket आया था उसको देख लेते हैं, कोई upgrades कर देते हैं, patch management कर देते हैं. If you shift all of this workload to the public cloud, then they can invest more of their time in specializing in the security and privacy aspects, which otherwise from a business and the practical perspective is never achieved. You can always wish for this, but वो generally होता कभी नहीं है because there's only so many hours and you cannot do everything. So staff specialization achieve हो सकती है within security and privacy by using public cloud. And again, I'm not promoting public cloud here. The purpose of this presentation is to share with you what are the security and privacy upsides and downsides. Then there is resource availability. This is actually one of the key reasons why anybody would want to shift on cloud. अगर मेरा कराची में एक डेटा सेंटर है और हर साल वहाँ पे अर्बन फ्लडिंग होती है और I have a risk यार कल को मेरा डेटा सेंटर फ्लड हो जाए तो मेरी प्रोडक्शन एप्लीकेशंस की अवेलेबिलिटी डिस्टर्ब हो सकती है, ठीक है. और मे बी आई एम मेंटेनिंग a DR site in an area जहाँ पे there is more chance by virtue of a business being there is a more chance of natural disasters. So cloud provides you that kind of a limitless geographic presence. I could be in one country and my DR could be in a whole different continent separated by these oceans, and I can have a backup site in whole different location. And then, so a lot of this resource availability, what does this tell us in terms of security and privacy? So अगर कोई security incident होता है, so I can always spin up new resources in a very fast and robust and efficient manner, जो कि otherwise in public cloud के अलावा achieve नहीं हो सकता, because they provide you the provisioning interfaces and the systems जो कि जिसको otherwise वो colocation services कहते हैं उनमें नहीं होता. इसी तरह when it comes to privacy, if a breach first happens, from a privacy perspective, I'm using public cloud, I have better opportunities to access and manage the records जो कि privacy regulations require करती हैं. And for those, I will always need resources, and those are available on the cloud. Then the fourth thing is backup and recovery. DR is one thing. DR is, of course, where you are looking to spin up production applications in case something adverse happens. But backup could serve multiple other reasons. So cloud, when you use public cloud, the sort of the backup and restoration procedures that you get, the services that you get, are far superior to what you would get on your own. And from a security and privacy perspective, you get to meet those. A regulation might require you to have the backup site, let's say 100 kilometers from your production site, and a public cloud can help you do that. And similarly for the privacy regulations compliance, also sort of the offsite compliance requirements. Then the mobile endpoints. If you are if you're a company that has a lot of mobile endpoints, then from security and privacy perspective, and you're using public cloud, all of the compute heavy workloads or compute heavy work will be done on the cloud end, while on the mobile devices only the lightweight front end applications होंगी वो deploy होंगी. And the reason this helps you in security and privacy is because whenever you're using mobile devices, and if you're an organization that uses a lot of them, you are exposed to a lot of privacy and security issues, because there are always concerns कि mobile devices पे आप कितना data रख सकते हैं, कितना नहीं रख सकते. But if you're using public cloud, so जो compute heavy, compute intensive work है, data वो सारा cloud पर reside कर रहा है, only a small amount will be residing on the mobile devices. So that's an upside to it. And we know these days that mobile devices are very pervasive and very common, and that's a very critical fact when you're looking at security and privacy. Then related to this fifth point is the data concentration. Data concentration से मुराद ये है कि if most of your data is lying on one, not one, rather on public cloud, and you are, let's say, a mobile intensive organization, then you have less risk of a security breach, because mobile devices के ऊपर आपका control कम होता है, and people are coming in and out of your organization. Maybe you have a sales force that is in thousands of numbers, and by virtue of those endpoint devices जो कि वो sales force use कर रही होती है, you are essentially being exposed. But if your data is concentrated on the public cloud and not on those endpoint devices, you are essentially less exposed to the risks associated with the use of those devices, and the reason is your data is concentrated in cloud and not on the endpoint devices. Then what are some of the downsides? Downsides is the first downside is, of course, the complexity when it comes to public cloud. Generally in IT, anybody would understand that the more complex your IT infrastructure is, the less secure you are. In other words, there is an inverse relationship between the complexity and the security and privacy. So security, greater the complexity, the greater will be the vulnerability that you could be exposed to. And the best example could be that you have a very large attack surface. Because you are in cloud, your data is living in a shared model somewhere in the world, and the attack surface is simply way too much compared to what it would be if you were doing it on your own data center or in-house. And from privacy perspective, if the security or the attack surface is large, that means you are exposed to a lot of security risks, and that also heightens the privacy risk from the unauthorized access, use, or modification or destruction of the personal data if you use that on public cloud. Then the second aspect is sort of the shared multi-tenant environment in which most of the public clouds operate. Uh, in किसी भी public cloud में there's a focus on logical separation rather than physical separation, because you're using the same resources and they are being split into different users. And a lot of times, rather in all the times, I do not know who the other consumers of that cloud service are, which are using the same physical resources. And what that does for me is it exposes me to the risks that comes from using these shared resources. Uh, there have been incidents jahan pe botnets were deployed by going into a cloud as a consumer, and you simply get an account, you deploy a botnet, or maybe you want to launch a DDoS attack, or maybe you want to launch a WPA2 वो जो cracking होती है. तो you simply go to cloud and you get some server on rent in a multi-tenant environment, and you start attacking the machines of your target area. So a lot of these vulnerabilities come when you are using a shared multi-tenant environment. The third risk to security and privacy is from the very fact that when you use public cloud, you're using it over the internet. It's not over a private network. And when you are on the internet, so your threats increase manifold compared to what you would previously see. And the effect is somewhat, जिस तरह वो मैं आपको शुरू में वाईफाई का बता रहा था कि जब वायरलेस नेटवर्क्स आए थे तो all of a sudden your organizations were now open. The signals are going out and you cannot control them, really. But so similar to that, when you are over the internet accessing public cloud, you're essentially exposed to the rest of the world and anything can happen. And security में कहते हैं it's not a matter of okay, whether you will be breached or not. It's a matter of when you will be breached. You are going to be breached sooner or later. And वो जो फिर zero trust model का concept आया था कि you consider anything and everything as vulnerable. Then the last aspect is sort of the downside of security and privacy is the loss of control. Control is actually the crux of the aspect that we're talking about. Anything uh, uh, anything related to privacy and security is driven by control. If you do not control your IT environment and somebody else controls it, if you do not have the visibility into your environment, that means you do not have the control. And that means that you do not know how secure you are. That means you do not have the assurance कि क्या आप privacy regulations की requirements को meet कर रहे हैं कि नहीं कर रहे. And most of the cases when you buy these cloud services, तो मुझे there is no POC signed to me. But compared to this, if I'm deploying some application on site, I know कि मेरी applications का जो application security को there is somebody looking after that. मेरे servers को एक बंदा देख रहा है, email server को कोई और देख रहा है. Maybe one body is looking, but at least I know who is the point of contact if something goes wrong. But in case of cloud, all I'm doing is going to the website, creating an account, and then I have no idea who's looking after which components. And that lack of control, that lack of visibility, you relinquish all kinds of situational awareness जो कि चाहिए होती है to manage security and privacy. And, based on these, there are a couple of decision factors. If you are choosing public cloud, what are some of the areas that you can pay close attention to and increase your security and privacy protection? So the first thing is what are the organizations or the consumers' own security and privacy objectives? And so for example, if you are a government organization और वो government organization citizens का data collect करती है, उसके लिए security and privacy objectives are at a whole different level than compared to any other organization. Or if you're an organization that deals with confidential data, for example, a government organization जो कि confidential data से deal करती है, उनके लिए security और privacy objectives बिल्कुल ही different होंगे compared to somebody else. So a lot of times it always starts with what is the security posture that you are after? What are the privacy regulations that apply to you? And those security and privacy objectives then drive the rest of the decision making. So that's point number one. Point number two is the prioritization. And by prioritization, I mean, even if you know what are the assets that you need to protect, उनको manage कौन कर रहा है, उनके admins कौन है, उनके applications कौन सी हैं, you can never really assure highest level of security for all of the information assets. And in that case, what is done is you prioritize your security risks from the angle of criticality and sensitivity. And by criticality, I mean कि मेरे business concern के लिए या मेरे business के लिए कौन सी चीज़ mission critical है, maybe less critical है, and by sensitivity, a lot of those privacy aspects come in, कि confidential है कि नहीं है, and so on. So when considering a public cloud, you look at your workloads and then you determine and prioritize them. And there are many other ways that you can prioritize them, but these really are one of the two most common ways that you would want to do the prioritization. And number three are the service agreements. In any typical cloud subscription, there are different legal instruments that are used when you sign up with the cloud. Usme the most common ones are the SLA, service level agreement. इसको देखना इसलिए जरूरी है कि ये आपको बताता है कि what will happen in the case of failure. Service provision का क्या होगा? If you are a university and आप अपने जो LMS है उसमें जो admissions का module है, you are running it on cloud and that data center is based out of Pakistan and उसकी जो availability है जब आपने admissions open किए, thousands and thousands of people are going to your website and submitting the applications, so availability certainly becomes a very, very critical matter to you. And that availability would be explained in the service level agreements. Okay, what sort of availability is being assured by the cloud provider? So a lot of times, even a lot of time it comes down to कि different cloud providers अपने SLA में क्या expected level of service assure कर रहे हैं. The second legal agreement जो कि cloud providers use करते हैं, these are the privacy policies. And they are very critical from the privacy regulations point of view. This policy will help you understand कि consumer की information को cloud provider कैसे collect करेगा, use करेगा, कहाँ store करेगा, and so on. So you may want to pay a close attention to the privacy policy. Third is the acceptable use policy. In other words, वो जो fair usage policies होती हैं. And these could be important. For example, if you are expecting a sharp increase in your workloads and the acceptable use policy doesn't allow it, you might want to take it upfront with the cloud provider. And the third is the terms of use. Terms of use essentially determine the licensing of the services. And that's critical also because licensing could take very different forms. For example, licensing could be done based on number of users. Licensing could be done based on number of servers. Licensing could be done based on the consumption of resources, and there are a couple of other ways. So paying attention to these kind of details is very important from security as well as privacy perspective. And last but not the least is the negotiability of the terms of service. And by that I mean, by the way, most of these cloud providers, their terms are non-negotiable. If I'm a cloud consumer, I cannot go and ask IBM's legal department कि इस term को आप मेरे लिए change कर दें. And this is in many ways this is right because अगर वो हर term को negotiable करने लगे तो जो cloud की strength है, वो जो economies of scale है, availability है, वो शायद वो ना दे सके. And so there's an upside to that. But if you are an organization that is managing the critical infrastructure of a country, and you cannot have any breach, you simply cannot afford a breach in your systems. You might want to deal with a cloud provider that provides you that is open to negotiations, where you can share with them your requirements on security as well as privacy perspectives. Maybe there's a certain regulation that is applied specifically to your industry or to your use case and not otherwise. So you would be looking for a cloud provider that is open to those kind of negotiations and changing their and open to changing their terms of services. So these are some of the sort of key decision factors if you're opting for a public cloud service. And then these really are the if you are moving into cloud, which the world is. So on an ongoing basis, what are some of the areas that you, as the business leader, as an individual who is interested in cloud, maybe a technology specialist, what are some of the areas that you may want to keep an eye out for on a long-term horizon? And the first thing is governance. Governance of public cloud. Governance to public cloud is essentially revolving around कि किस तरह roles or responsibilities split होंगे between cloud service provider and the cloud consumer. And then that split will also drive the security or sort of the risk management systems. Because if I'm responsible for all the security of the infrastructure, I better have a risk management plan around that. So governance is one key aspect. The next thing is compliance. Compliance is, of course, from the privacy is a part of compliance, but then there are other laws related to this. For example, data कहाँ पे location locate हो सकता है नहीं हो सकता. So you would need to understand कि अगर आपका cloud provider कल को नया data center खोल रहा है, हम पाकिस्तान में and we are using a cloud provider, वो कल को अगर इंडिया में अपना data center खोल लेते हैं, so should we continue to keep using their service or not, and these kind of matters. Then trust. Trust is a very important aspect, and this is driven by control. If we relinquish our control to a cloud provider, we are essentially putting all our faith and trust in the cloud provider. So the question arises कि cloud provider कैसे security and privacy risk को account for करता है? उसमें it could be insider access. What if somebody from within the cloud provider's organization acts as a threat to the security and privacy? Data ownership. If I am putting all my consumer, all my financial, all my intellectual property data on cloud, you may want to take it upfront with the cloud provider. Data ownership resides with which party. Then composite services होती हैं कि where cloud provider is using, for example, cloud provider is providing you the software as a service, applications, but that cloud provider is using the infrastructure or the platform from other cloud providers, and they are layered on top of each other, and they are being packaged in a way, in a new way as a new cloud provider. So you might want to have to understand those third-party risks, then visibility, whether you as a cloud consumer has the visibility into the security management practices of the cloud provider or not, and so on. So all of these aspects come under the umbrella of trust, and that's an important area when you have to consider cloud provider in a long-term horizon. The fourth aspect is architecture. Architecture se murad, essentially, one way to look at it is from the attack surface point of view, because a lot of time security hardening depends on the attack surface. An attack surface is a function of architecture. So what sort of architecture cloud provider use कर रहे हैं? Data centers कहाँ पे हैं? Do they use VPC based infrastructure or जिसको in other ways classical cloud infrastructure कहा जाता है? So a lot of those architectural aspects are very important on a regular ongoing basis. VM के images हैं, तो VM के images की storage, उनकी replication, that's an important aspect in security. Then IAM is identity and access management. With COVID, people are accessing devices, resources remotely, and not just within the same nation state, maybe in some other country. So a lot of time, identity, users की authentication, provisioning of accesses, they become very critical. अगर एक employee, एक student, एक faculty join करता है organization को, and they are being assigned an access to a cloud provider, कल को अगर वो छोड़ के चला जाता है, तो does anybody take any action in deprovisioning their accesses? Not. So a lot of times, identity and access management ये बहुत critical होती है IT में. ये तो खैर, not just in public cloud, but otherwise it's one of the critical areas, especially in the COVID times. The data protection. Data protection is again very important. For example, if all of your data is residing in cloud, तो earlier हमने देखा कि इसकी upside भी है, but there's a downside also. You are now being exposed. जिस तरह वो there's an example, famous example. There was a famous bank robber और उससे पूछा गया कि why do you rob banks? And he said कि that's because that's where the money is. And in 21st century, data is the currency that is being used in big business, and cyber security threats, and they're one of the biggest business these days. Even your drug trade used to be the largest sort of the illegal activity where a lot of wealth was generated. But in nowadays world, cyber criminals, then they are generating the most wealth when it comes to non-legal activities. At least they're in the top three. So data is really the currency of 21st century. So data protection is a key aspect on an ongoing basis. Then availability. Availability, of course, from the perspective of your own objectives. If you are running an application that needs to be up and you cannot afford a downtime of even few minutes, you might want to look at how the वो जो होता है ना 99.9, 99.99, how many number of digits of availability that they are assuring. For example, 99.95% availability, उसमें भी साल में at least 4.38 hours downtime आता है. And you might want to think upfront whether, or maybe on an ongoing basis, if your situation changes, what are your downtime, what kind of a risk that you can absorb when it comes to downtime. Then incident response, cybersecurity में जैसे मैंने पहले कहा कि it's not a matter of whether you will be breached or not, but it's a matter of when you will be breached. And that's the case with cloud providers or public cloud providers also. So as a consumer, it is important to consider the cloud provider का incident response mechanism क्या है. How the cloud provider is dealing with all the incidents that are happening on their networks. Do they have an escalation mechanism? Do they have an investigation mechanism? कोई threat hunting का plan है उनके पास कि नहीं, and so on. So these were some of the aspects which I feel with the cloud being one of the very key technologically key movements nowadays. It's very important to understand that if we are using as institutions, as individuals, public cloud, तो security और privacy के क्या aspects हैं जिनको देखना चाहिए. So with this, I'll stop and I'll be open to any comments or questions. I think there are a few individuals waiting in the lobby. Okay, I see a hand. Humayun Zafar.
Thank you very much, Hashim. Fantastic presentation and a wealth of knowledge that you provided in a key area. And I think it was pertinent, and it's very relevant for today's time. And you have issued all the major issues in that thing. And thank you very much for providing this information. I have two questions, basically. One is regarding the SLAs. You partially did discuss that, mention that. And the another one is the ensuring the function that we want in a public cloud service provider. So the first question is that you mentioned that the public cloud service providers do not have SLAs for individual customers or organizations. They don't change that. But that does not suit the organizations who want to go for, because different organizations will have different requirements. So don't they have a separate SLAs for each organization, or should they not have a separate SLA for each organization, that what kind of service level they want? Some organizations or users or clients would want a higher level of availability and security features than the other ones. And the second question is, you mentioned that all the service providers, public cloud service providers, should provide all these things. Excuse me. And they're all very important. But a common clients or user they cannot ensure that all those services are actually being provided or not by the cloud service provider, though they claim it. So like for when a bank wants to operate in Pakistan or anywhere else, it has to get some kind of recognition or accreditation by a organization like State Bank of Pakistan in Pakistan, and they monitor that okay, those banks are complying to those regulations. So, is there any body in the world here which can be applicable for Pakistan users as well, that those cloud service providers are actually providing all those services? Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Humayun. And first of all, thank you for your kind comments. So you've asked two questions. One is regarding SLAs. And I think your question was whether the cloud providers uh, uh, allow the flexibility to meet the customer's demands, correct?
Right, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So SLAs are really the ability to negotiate an SLA, in my experience, comes from the ability to influence that contract or not. And if you are a consumer, if I'm a bank and I'm moving my, let's say in the case of Pakistan, where you're not allowed to move the production workloads, but you can move non-production workloads to cloud. Last year, there was a circular out from SDP in somewhere in Northam, and they allowed certain kind of workloads to be moved to cloud. And if I'm a bank and I go and talk to one of these major cloud providers, it's more of a function of business use case and the business negotiation that to conduct, whether they would be willing to modify their SLA or not. Okay. And so in most of the cases, if I'm a student and I'm using cloud for my final year project, I possibly do not have I do not have the time or maybe the energy to go into that, But if I'm a, if I know, if I'm a customer in which the cloud provider is also concentrated in other words, I'm one of the major customers, of course they would be willing. So to me, SLAs, the ability to modify the SLA, to negotiate the availabilities for your own requirements is a function of how much of an influence you have in the business transaction. Of course, that entails the architectural infrastructure changes that the cloud provider may not be willing to do, if because that may entail a lot of changes. So that's point number one. And your second question, uh, can you repeat your second question? I think.
Yeah, my second question was that okay, there are all these things that a public cloud provider says that he's providing, and all these security features and all those business
Yeah, yeah.
continuity planning and disaster recovery thing, how to ensure like escrow facility and things like that. How can we assure they may have certification of certain things, but to ensure who is going to guarantee that all those functionalities or protections are being provided by the public cloud service provider.
So there's only so much assurance that you can get, and but there are certain ways that a cloud provider uh, provides that assurance. And for example, uh, in my case, we work with IBM a lot, and IBM has this specific offering called IBM Financial Services Cloud. And that financial services cloud is governed by a consortium of financial services industry veterans globally. And there's a body that oversees that financial services cloud. And that body is outside of the cloud service provider. And what this cloud provider uh, proposes is that by virtue of having that independent oversight board, and taking into account their guidelines, they are covering the risks associated with the financial services. Financial services में सबसे बड़ा रिस्क जो है वो सिक्योरिटी और प्राइवेसी के ये दो रिस्क हैं जो फाइनेंशियल सर्विस इंडस्ट्री को सबसे ज्यादा होते हैं. तो in this particular use case, that's how they are assuring this. The second way that I've seen it happen is through certification. So, for example, I think I mentioned PCI DSS at one point. If I'm using a payment application and that is deployed on a cloud that already is PCI DSS, PADSS certified, all I need to do is to show to my regulator that where my workloads are being deployed, that whole environment, that the application where the production systems are running, they are PCI DSS compliant, and that is acceptable to them. Of course, things change from a geography to geography. So these are some of the ways that you can get the assurance that you need specific to a certain industry or a use case. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's
Yeah, thank you. That's a good answer. But it also raises a few more points, if I may. That, for example, the certification thing. You know, I know, everybody knows that certification is done by the auditors of that specific certification, and they see that you have complied to all the regulations. But that the compliance is very much ensured by organizations which are being audited at the time of examination or auditing. But we don't know that after the audit, after they have got the certification, are they really following all those compliances, and they're compliant or not after that in the normal day-to-day operations or not? I mean, we know that we have experiences that at the time of audit for a certification, everything is spick and span. But when they go on in normal operations, then there are lapses and all those kind of things. So what do you say about that? By the way, the financial regulation mentioned, if that can be used by any public cloud, so that should be good enough for all other services that are being offered by the cloud service provider. I would think so. Thank you.
So I think you've brought a good point, and it's in my experience. For example, I've worked in audit industry for a couple of years, and you're spot on where you mentioned that when the audit is being conducted, everything is everything is compliant, everything checks all the boxes, and pretty much all of it seems to be okay. But what happens in between of the two audits? Uh, I guess that's uh, more of a law, and that's more of a question that needs to be addressed at the uh, law setting body level, if you know what I mean. So you have to balance, in my point of view, you would have to balance the regulations with the ease of doing business. And there will always be gaps, there will always be loopholes, and it's an evolution that will be happening. And in many ways, you can have a lot of regulations to fill those gaps, but if that hampers your ease of doing business, maybe that's counterproductive. So I guess that's more of that's more of a an evolution that happens in human societies as we speak, and there will always be more things that need to be done. Whether having more regulation, more audits is the answer to it, I don't know. That's a matter of time, and you see what works or what doesn't work. So that would be sort of my
Yeah,
2 cents on
thank
this.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. But did you get a chance to look at the cybersecurity law that has been passed recently or is under consideration, and the public data protection law by the government of Pakistan and the Senate's? Did you get a chance to look at that? Because there's a clause in that bill and in the law about the putting the data, especially public data, the government of Pakistan's data, on public clouds, and they have categorized all the information or all the data into three level of criticality. So in that, they say that the top level, the critical data should not be residing out of Pakistan.
Hmm.
So that's one of the conditions. So that means that any public cloud service provider has to have a footprint in Pakistan to
Yeah.
be able to accept it, considered entities here in Pakistan.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. I mean, that's an evolution that we're seeing in Pakistan, and only time will tell whether how much of that goes into. I mean, creating laws is one thing, implementing them is another, and then regulating the breaches of those laws is a different thing altogether. So only time will tell how well will this be implemented and regulated on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, yeah, and I think as a professional here in Pakistan, the professionals who are in this field, they need to have some influence, and they need to create special groups so that certain policy guidelines are followed according to the local needs as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why you have these industry bodies who are consulted before any regulation that would impact their industry, and an input is sought from the players in that industry, from the associations that reflect those industries. So I'm sure some those things would have already been done, but as we all know, in case of Pakistan, we should always be hopeful, but we should always expect things to go take a certain path as you usually do in Pakistan. You know.
Very right. I know for personally, based on personal experience, that in case of this cybersecurity law and public data protection law, in doing the inclusion and consulting all the private and public parties and all the concerned stakeholders. The question is that how we can maintain that level of involvement and application. You know, the enforcement of those regulations and laws, as you mentioned. So we need to have some kind of a body that ensures that these regulations are being uh, 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 implemented properly and followed by all the stakeholders and the organization that are affected by that.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more to what you're suggesting, I'm not sure at this point if there is such a mechanism in place, and based on the way you explained, I do not feel there is. So it would be a good value addition if individuals or the players or the leaders in the industry can get together and 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 be a part and as well as influence those decisions with the government.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. So yes, Aftab, I saw you come off mute. Ji Aftab, do you have a question or a comment? Okay. Any other questions or comments from anybody? You're welcome to unmute
Mic
and share
is
with us.
mute. If his mic is mute, so you need to unmute the mic before he talks.
Yeah, yeah. I saw Aftab coming off mute for a second then, but I guess that could have been as an error. So that's okay. You can always reach out to me after this session. I still have 2 minutes, and I'd like to use those to get to know you. And so I'll go around my participant attendees list, and I'll take your name. If you would like to share with the rest of the audience, share your name, share where you work, and your interest in cloud technologies. So the first person that I see is, I believe this is a roll number 175815556. I don't know what your name is, but if you care to share with the rest of us, you're welcome to unmute. Next, I see engineer Asif. Oh, sorry. Yes, go on.
Hello, sir. Hope you will be fine. My name is Abdullah Abbas, and I am currently enrolled in MS program in geology. My sir shared link of your session. That's why I joined it for my research purpose.
Great. And what program are you enrolled in?
Sir, MSIT.
MSIT. Okay. Okay. And cloud is an area of your project.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Great. Thank you for joining. Next, we have Hamaisa. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I started off as a programmer. I am now IT enterprise and digital transformation consultant, um, working currently working independently, but I work with different organizations and uh, software houses and consulting groups, so in and outside of Pakistan. That's what. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next, we have Khalid. So with this, we're already on top of the hour. Thank you all for joining. I hope this was a useful spend of your time. The next session on cloud technology is going to be 4 weeks from now. Ahmed here would be sharing the invites. Immediately next week, we are going to have a session on Internet of Things. And we are also planning to move these sessions on site. They could be happening at one of the universities in Islamabad. They will be in hybrid mode though. So keep checking your emails. Ahmed will be sharing the invites for IoT just in case you are also interested in Internet of Things. So with this, thank you all for joining and have a nice evening.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Thank you. Thank you very much.